So I think we might make a start. Welcome, everyone. My name is Dr. Ben Buchanan, and this is Dr. Nathan Castle. I am the co-founder and CEO of NovoPsych, which I understand probably most of you are used to NovoPsych and know how NovoPsych works. But for those of you who don't know about NovoPsych, please check it out. Nathan Castle is going to talk with us tonight about imposter syndrome among mental health professionals. Imposter syndrome is a very common thing. Nathan and I were just talking before. He's got it a bit, I've got it a bit. And I think that, you know, if you're here at this webinar, it probably means that you've got it a bit as well. And so welcome to everyone. If you haven't yet taken the professional self-doubt questionnaire on NovoPsych, can I please ask you to go to novopsych.com.au and log into your account, and there's a questionnaire there called the professional self-doubt questionnaire. So if everyone can log into NovoPsych before we start, and then navigate to the assessments tab and press professional self-doubt, PSD, and then press administer. And then there should be a client there called either generic client or dummy client. If you can just administer it to yourself, it will be useful for this webinar because we're going to be interpreting some of the results using the professional self-doubt questionnaire. So Nathan, take it away.
Thank you very much. And thank you for the intro. So this is something that I think for both Ben and I was an important part of the experience of being a psychologist to talk about. Certainly, I've got my own imposter syndrome and professional self-doubt about certain areas. Ben has his. And by looking at the amount of people that were interested in this webinar, I think it is one of the more common experiences for us in this profession, where we don't always get clear-cut answers. So moving on to what we're going to actually learn today, we're actually going to learn how to identify our own imposter syndrome. One of the hard things about imposter syndrome is that it's so vague and nebulous. Like, what does it really mean? It can mean different things to different people. We hope that at the very least you walk away today with a clear understanding of what it is, and also a measure of where you sit. And we measure this with the professional self-doubt scale, which hopefully most of you have completed and have your own results on. We're also going to learn to hone in our own belief around professional skills using this counselling self-estimate inventory. And this really kind of cuts up what we think are our strengths and perhaps our weaknesses or areas to improve in our therapy work. And it's a really nice way to kind of clarify what this means for us. We're going to talk about how professional self-doubt interacts with client outcomes. And this is probably where myself, I know, got most interested in it. How would something like professional self-doubt impact client outcomes? And we're definitely going to talk a lot about that today. We're going to combine self-care skills, what we can do to be sustainable psychologists in today's times. So we've got some high-flying people, some people that I particularly love up here today, and I'd love to see in the chat what people think of the common elements between these 5 people, other than obviously being successful in their respective fields. What is a common thread? All right, we've got some here.
Some people are saying confidence, some people are saying education, failure, success, imposter syndrome, self-doubt, self-review, anxiety, honesty, worth. We've got lots of great ones. What is it, Nathan? Tell us the answer.
It's professional self-doubt, which also links into some of the other things that you've said, like grit and self-reflection. All these people have been documented throughout interviews and some journals, including Einstein, very much being at times feeling like their value and where they stood in their profession, that it wasn't due to them, that they were really uncertain about their ability, as well contrasted with how high up they were being held. And I think this is a really human experience to have with professional self-doubt. I mean, if we've got these people up here experiencing this nagging feeling that I don't know if I'm effective, or I'm doing the job that I could do, or I'm not good enough, I think it probably says that it's common to many people. And certainly the research tells us that 70% of people will have, high feelings of professional self-doubt at some point in their career. So let me throw out a question. Speaking of this, who here thinks that the therapy that you provide is worth the recommended fee, or the APS recommended fee, of $267 per session? We've got it up on a poll, and we've got the options of yes, that's good value, no, that's not good value. Importantly, we're asking about your therapy, not therapy in general. I think Ben can see the responses on the back end as there.
I can. So we've got heaps of people responding, and I can see that 80% of people think that the APS recommended fee does not represent good value for the therapy that they provide.
And this is a wonderful little snapshot. Now, take out the politics or the economics of it, right? But for us, we're putting in many years of training. For some people, up to a decade. We're going through a very challenging role that requires a lot of sophisticated thinking intellectually, plus all the interpersonal skills and strengths that we need to put forward with some of the highly or most highly distressed people that we experience here in Australia. And still, with all of that, myself included, I would sit in that 80% camp. This feeling like, even though that's recommended, that doesn't seem to fit with the value that I put forward. This is just a wonderful example of the feelings that rise up in us, and how it may also influence our day-to-day work. Imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome, in part, includes professional self-doubt. Imposter syndrome is this idea that what we know, what our abilities are so far off the mark of our contemporaries, our colleagues in our field, that we're down here, they're up here, but our roles are the same, our jobs are the same, so we must be a fraud. We must be the imposter. The fascinating thing about imposter syndrome is that so many people experience it, which means that it's actually the norm to feel like the imposter. And I love this graphic because it kind of indicates the overlap in reality of what you know and what your colleagues around you know. That actually we all know different things. We all have, and particularly in our profession, different styles. Professional self-doubt. The way that I think of professional self-doubt is the opposite to the expert stance. An expert, or someone in that expert stance, needs to act confidently and accurately to maintain their position. The side effect of this is that there is less kind of deliberate reflection about the evidence. The consequence being that it becomes hard for an expert to separate what they do know and they don't know. And often they can be closed to the evidence in front of them. When we talk about the value of professional self-doubt, part of this is not being in the expert stance. And I'm going to tell you why. When we're in this expert stance as therapists, there's a few things that you see as a common pattern. A fixed mindset. Beliefs are fixed on what works for clients. A subscription model, I guess, for clients around therapy. And you're more likely to hear someone in this mindset say, they stopped attending because they weren't therapy ready. This sense that It's all in the client. They are more likely to be collecting models, different theoretical models. We know now that there's over 450 psychological models out there. Try and catch them all, like Pokemon. I don't know anyone that has, and it would be exhausting to try and do so. But this is what happens sometimes in this expert stance. You know, you're able to tell people you're certified with this acronym and that acronym, and this one took a year and this one took 2 years. It's not that those things aren't helpful, but consistently doing them as a way to pump up expertise may not be so helpful. And then lastly, I talked about that closing off. There's a way to ask clients whether it's working for them without really inviting feedback. Things like an offhand comment, how was the session? Does this fit? And you might find that, you know, people in the expert stance say, oh, I never get negative feedback from my clients. I never get my clients telling me, you know, what could change. You know, I think they're usually very happy. This probably says a lot more that they're in expert mode and they're unlikely to be curious, which is what professional self-doubt gives us. And this is why professional self-doubt is actually associated with more effective therapy. Get that? The higher the professional self-doubt, the more effective a therapist is likely to be. And here's a few of the reasons why. When we have professional self-doubt, we have an error-centric mindset. We're reflecting on moments that didn't go well in therapy. You know, this might be by doing the DAS 21 and noticing that actually those scores went up. You know, even though we thought it was the perfect session and we did everything that we wanted to do, those scores still went up. It might be the scientist mindset. Try and disconfirm your beliefs or practices. Might be things like getting a supervisor to review your work, or just simply thinking and reflecting about who you feel you're most effective with. For example, depressive disorders, and then perhaps even looking at your results with clients on the DAS 21 that have depression. And lastly, a feedback mindset. Asking a client with an open invitation of what could be done differently in therapy. This might be done ad hoc, or it might be done systematically through something like an alliance measure, like the Agnew relationship measure, which is 5 questions in NovaPsych, and can measure the strength of the alliance in any given session. So when we talk about the value of professional self-doubt and what it can give us, the gift it can give us, it's everything in this green category here. In some ways, we want to protect ourselves against being too self-doubtful, you know, doubting everything that we do, but we certainly don't want to swing the other way where we're confident and blind because we're overconfident about what we do. So the professional self-doubt scale, you can see mine here. I sit in the 78th percentile, and it's these 9 questions that assess the uncertainty a therapist has in their ability to help their clients. Questions like, I'm unsure how best to deal effectively with the patient, and rating how much they agree or disagree with that. And I'm afraid that I'm doing more harm than good when treating a patient. Really, what this gives us as we look at the results is the areas where we are feeling more uncertain. And we've even got here a comparison between trainees and professionals who are experienced or working out there in the real world. It's a really lovely way to kind of reflect on whether the self-doubt is there, which means that the curiosity is there as well.
And can I just reflect on your scores?
Please do.
So what did you score again? You scored 78.
Mm-hmm.
So in comparison to other experienced psychologists, you're on the 78th percentile for your professional self-doubt. I mean, this is interesting because, I mean, when I look at you, you're one of the more confident people on the outside. And so I suppose it's interesting to reflect that self-doubt, you can be confident on the outside. You can show confidence with your clients, and at the same time have that curious, open, self-doubting, scientist-like stance. Yeah. Anyway, I thought it's interesting because you come across as pretty confident.
You know what my reflection is there, Ben? Because we know each other for a long time now. It's funny that even hear you say that that's my stance as I come across, because it doesn't always feel that way. It doesn't always feel confident. And I think that's also something to reflect on, that the outer doesn't always match with how we feel inside. But I like how you put it, the scientist stance, willing to be curious no matter how we might kind of be on the outside. Wonderful. And of course, everyone, or most people here rather, have completed the professional self-doubt scale. But let's get to what the results showed us of people who completed this. So on the back end of NovaPsych, we can see some of those results. And professional self-doubt really varied widely. So higher self-doubt indicating that we're really uncertain on the treatment that we provide and ability to be effective with clients. Low professional self-doubt saying that we're really confident what we do works, and we know it works for all our clients. So professional self-doubt ranged from the 5th to the 99th percentile. And the average, it was skewed for everyone here, largely in that high professional self-doubt range. The average was around the 96th percentile. And I think that makes sense because most people here are motivated to attend a training about it. So it makes sense that there was more professional self-doubt in this group. And it's worth noting what this kind of means. The professional self-doubt scale, we actually wish there's been more research on it, but these are the general guidelines of how you might think about it. I will give the disclaimer that professional self-doubt is a very individual thing, okay? It's not like, we have the categories of mental illness or those kind of things. You really need to reflect about where it sits for you in terms of your professional journey. Are you early, mid, or late? Are you a trainee? What service are you in? All these things impact your professional self-doubt. So percentiles below 10, starting really, really low, so highly confident, particularly these very low scores, it actually may come up more in the setting of someone getting supervision or training. And it's likely that actually it's the dynamic of the relationship that could result in such low scores. And what I mean by that is, if this is actually assessed within the dynamic of a supervision relationship, for example, the trainee or the psychologist may want to seem more competent or less doubting. And it's kind of a bit of nervousness, perhaps, or guardedness about how they really feel. From that point of view, really low scores or perhaps high confidence, it can be worth being curious about how the relationship's going in those kind of contexts. For percentiles somewhere between 50 to 90, these are moderately high levels of professional self-doubt, and these are the types that predict better client outcomes and are kind of an antidote to inaccurate self-appraisal. What we mean there is that, a lot of studies have shown psychologists, like many other disciplines, overestimate their abilities. But our tendency to inflate how effective we are is just a human thing that we do. And professional self-doubt can be an antidote to this. So high scores in this range are also associated with better alliance scores, or that therapeutic relationship being more robust. When we're getting all the way up to 99, it's probably something to think about contextually about how you are in your profession and your practice or your service, but these may be at levels where you're pervasively kind of self-doubting, that it may be tipping the scales the other direction for you, that it might be challenging to work day to day. And really, this is where we talk about that kind of individual reflection. If that sits with you, the ideas of supervision, kind of having more peer consultations, or just simply being able to consult with colleagues about the profession generally can be really helpful here as well. Now, I thought that this would be something fascinating as well to put in around, we're talking about professional self-doubt and how it is associated with better outcomes for clients. Traditionally, we think of all these other things that help client outcomes. We think of supervision. We think of doing many, many hours of professional development, which I know everyone here does because you're in it right now. We're doing it right now. You know, our own personal therapy, clinical experience, years in the field. And these four things in particular, before we move on to number 5, are the things that we have held for many, many years as the way to get better at our craft. Unfortunately, when you look at the research, it's pretty clear on a lot of these. The clearest being professional development. Professional development is not associated with better outcomes for clients. The thinking being that it is too far removed to actually impact the client once we get to that session. The other thing is supervision. This has been extensively studied. And the sentence that really comes out at me from the research is that we're no clearer on knowing that supervision can help our clients than we were 40 years ago. It's a direct quote from a fantastic meta-analysis looking at this. And that's startling because I don't know about you, I really highly value supervision. The key here is it does help confidence, it does help self-care, and it does help professional identity. It just doesn't help client outcomes directly. Therapists' own personal therapy, being able to kind of deal with their own crap, doesn't help directly to client outcomes. And clinical experience, which is a really fascinating one. We would all assume that the more clients we see, hundreds, then thousands, and so on, we're getting better, we're honing our craft. But a lot of the research actually says that we develop habits and we repeat those habits whether or not they work. And this brings me to the last one, access to outcome measure feedback. Doing a DAS, doing a GAD-7 or whatever measure you use actually doesn't improve client outcomes unless you get the results and you talk to that person in front of you. And the reason for this is that it likely empowers the client and means that they are an agent of change. That if things are going really well, that's cheerleading, that's fantastic. We are really kicking goals here. But if they are kind of flatlining, no change, or they're getting worse in whichever direction, something different needs to happen. And it can really facilitate conversations about what we do differently. Again, we can see how this overlaps with that professional self-doubt. What we can see here, the factors that make the biggest difference in client outcomes are actually individual therapist factors. One of those being professional self-doubt. The curiosity, the ability to be open to what can help change a client's life. So for everyone here that has decided to take out their time and come to a training about professional self-doubt, and we can see from your results that, you know, people here experience professional self-doubt. I just want to say that this is a gift. This is a gift that you can harness for your client's benefit. It is not something that you have to deny, suppress, or try and get rid of. So these are the things that make a difference to client outcomes. Models, techniques, the specific stuff. It's less than 1% that impacts a client outcome. It's not to say it doesn't help. The therapeutic alliance or bond between a therapist or client accounts for 5% of client outcome. This is really huge. This is where we can do a lot of work talking about what the goal is for treatment, really getting a consensus and a shared understanding of what the problem is for the client and having a very empathetic stance and accepting stance to that, but also how they're going to get where they need to be. And then therapist factors overall contributing to 5 to 9% of the client outcome. So this is where you can do the most work to help your clients. I've got Ben jumping in now.
Hey Nathan, I thought I'd jump in because we've got lots of questions coming in the chat. If you go back to the previous slide, some people are wondering why the therapeutic alliance, such as bond, is so low. You put 5% there, and some people are saying that it should be much higher. I think I know the explanation, but correct me if I'm wrong. So these are the factors of the things within the therapy room. We know that the vast majority of client outcomes are actually predicted by things that have nothing to do with therapy. It's like whether the client gets a job, whether they give up smoking marijuana, their family circumstances. That contributes to the bulk of variability in client outcomes. And so this 5% of therapeutic alliance and 5 to 9% of therapist factors are the things overall that will contribute to the client outcome. And so they pale in comparison to things happening in the client's life, but they still are significant. Nathan, have I got that right?
Spot on. Spot on.
Great, thank you. Does that make sense for people? Because I saw lots of comments saying therapeutic alliance is only 5%. This is terribly low. This is what I've been working at. Yeah, some people are saying yes, thank you. That explanation makes sense.
Yeah, that is a great way to put it, Ben. And it's humbling, but it also says where we sit in the client's life. We are a person who is there to support them for a certain time of their life. Outside of that, family, job, pandemics, all that kind of stuff also play a role in whether a client's going to improve. Then,
yeah. And I think 5%. If CBT counts 1%, therapeutic alliance counts 5%, therapist factors count 9%. We can still have significant impact on their lives, but we're not superheroes. Therapy is not going to account for 100% of the variability in the client's outcomes.
So talking about therapists and the factors that we have, we do know that some therapists are better than others, but overall, fascinatingly, most of us sit in about the same area of effectiveness when we compare my caseload to someone else's caseload, and we think about what percent of clients get better. To show this, what we have here is a really good representation. Daryl Chow, who's a very intelligent and insightful and done some great research in this area, Australian. And he looked at a huge pool of therapists and how effective that they were, okay? And he split them up into quartiles of 25%. Right at the midpoint, right in the middle there, 62% improving, okay, on average. Now you have a look at either side of that, and 57% improving on the second quartile, of effectiveness, and 67% are improving on that third quartile, which means that the bulk, over 50%, are sitting in a 10% range of difference. That's really interesting, given that we all work in very different ways, different models, different styles, the things that make us special in terms of our bond and our alliance and everything else. And I will say as well, I sit right at that average point. I'm pretty average, to be honest. That's really where I'm sitting in that bulk stage, Ben.
So just some comments coming out from the chat, which are interesting. Sarah has said that looking at those statistics, that only on average about 62% of clients improve with therapy, that she finds that rather deflating and feels disheartened that only 62% of, or on average, she could only expect that 62% of the clients will experience significant improvement from therapy. What would you say to that, Nathan?
I think it's a journey as we start to learn this. For me, I'll tell you personally my experience, because I think there's no way not to be shocked when we first learn this. I know that that's how I felt, and I probably initially felt that deflation as well. I do think, though, that there's a gift in here, which is that it helps us to understand that not all of our clients get better, and there's no expectation that they do. While it's hard to initially kind of sit back and look at this and go 62%, and that feels low. Meanwhile, I'm going to get Ben up for a second to tell us comparators, common comparators to this. Meanwhile, it also allows us some acceptance of self-compassion, especially what we just talked about, that not everything that dictates a client outcome is in the therapy room or the therapist. That actually there's going to be some of our clients that don't get better and perhaps get worse, and that's okay. And in fact, that is representative of every therapist. So you are okay. Now, Ben, sorry, I am putting you on the spot here. And I hope I am putting you on the spot, but I vaguely remember you telling me some medical equivalents of how effective therapy is, and it might be cardiovascular medications. Can you remind me?
Yeah, so when people think about therapy and they learn that only 62% of clients will experience benefit, we think, oh my gosh, therapy is ridiculous. Psychology, I'm gonna quit psychology. But the truth is that when you compare therapy across other treatments, for example, getting a knee arthroscope, a surgery for one's knee, we think, oh, well, it's a surgeon doing a knee. Turns out that 0% of people, or it's not zero, but it turns out that that surgery is no better than placebo. So it's essentially, therapy is so much more effective than a surgery in that case. Therapy is about 10 times more effective than taking aspirin every day to protect against cardiovascular disease. It's 300% more effective at producing happiness than having money. We produce 3 times the benefit for happiness. So while 62% might sound low, when it comes to health treatments or medical treatments, surgeries, medication, whatever, it's actually pretty good. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Ben. I'm glad that you passed the test, okay? I threw you on the spot. And because the thing is, what are we comparing it to? We feel that sense of deflation when we compare it to how we feel we make an impact on client lives, right? And when we talk about these kind of results, we're talking about very significant observable changes, okay? And I think it's important to know that, none of the treatments or interventions that we have in the medical world or economic money, all these kind of things, none of them are foolproof, and either are we. So I really want people, if you take away anything, is from professional self-doubt, are understanding that us and the client as individuals aren't the only things that predict client outcome. Hopefully you walk away with this, with a sense of processing what the expectations are of you, what you can achieve with your clients, and that these are very strong and very good improvement rates comparative to the other things that we just assume are great. And it's really important, if we can accept that some of our clients are not going to get better, we can be curious using the tool of professional self-doubt and really think outside the box, you know, and talk to that client at 11 o'clock. George, you're not getting better. You've had this many sessions, and in fact, we're indicating that you're getting a bit worse. We need to do something drastically different. I want to spend some time to you to talk about what that might be. What you can get from that conversation can turn that around for that individual. And I just want to, I love the fact that Ben, you know, put this out there as well. We've just done an outcomes analysis. Do you want to speak to it, Ben?
Yeah, I'll speak to it.
Yeah.
So one of the things that we did, I did at a practice that I'm at called Foundation Psychology. We've got a group of about 10 psychologists, is that we collected DASs for all the clients at the beginning, middle, and end of therapy, to see actually how well we were doing in terms of improving their outcomes. What we found was that we had 61% of people were experiencing significant improvement, 16% of people experienced no change, and 24% of people actually got worse between the start of therapy and the end of therapy. And from talking with staff, and we, you know, Nathan ran this seminar with our team, and some people were really disheartened. They're like, oh my gosh, we're only helping 61% of people. But a few things came out of it. Firstly, that's about average. Secondly, this year in particular, and last year as well, COVID, has been the most challenging time there's been for decades to be a psychologist. And so for many of you at home doing this webinar, I imagine you're thinking, I'm just grinding away with clients. You know, my case is full of clients who are just grinding away, and I'm not curing anyone. And I think that's because, well, COVID is producing very difficult conditions for anyone to, for us at the moment, psychologists and our clients. And the other thing that we got as a team from these results is saying there's no expectation that we're helping everyone, but we can lean in to those people that are experiencing no change and deterioration and take responsibility for that and say, well, how can we, what are the little things that we can do just to make them 1% better, to make them 2% better? And I think that even though the headline numbers were a bit disheartening, from it, I think it's actually really empowering to say that we can make a difference just around the edges with all of those little tiny things that we can do to contribute.
I like the way you put that. And what really struck me about how you said even 1% difference is, remember, we don't know how these people would fare without therapy. So let's just take one of these clients, right? Let's say they go from the moderate range on the DAS to severe, so they've deteriorated. We can't also know that without therapy, that they wouldn't have gone all the way to extremely severe, had suicidal ideation, all these things. So it's something to also keep in mind, the context, and also knowing that therapy is one aspect. Okay. I think we've probably summarized this now, which is good, because this is really the spirit of this training, that there is a gift here. When you are using outcome measures with your clients and you're actually able to measure progress, are they getting better, staying the same, or getting worse, you can actually understand two core things. Not everyone gets better, and that's okay. We can accept that and sit okay with that. But you can also be proud of the results of the difference you do make, whilst holding responsibility and take ownership for what clients you identify need something different. It's not your ownership or responsibility to get them absolutely cured and recovered, but the ability to go, let's try something different here with this client. This is one of my clients, and this is with the DAS 21. This is the total distress score. And this is a client that you might see similar things in some of your clients. This is a client showing high, extremely severe distress, and throughout therapy, no matter how many sessions, it not budging. It is top scores all the way. The gift of professional self-doubt is for me to more and more lean into what's happening for this client with curiosity, and to either ask what's happening, what we can do different, or suggest, and see if we can use that scientist stance. What if we tried this and saw what happened to your distress in a few weeks' time? And that's just as important as these types of results that you will see too with your work, which is the wins. This client going from the extremely severe range under stress with the DAS and coming down to the normal range with only a few sessions. Both these clients that we see here are represented in everyone's caseload. Whether we are blind to it or see it, they're still there. So I would say the biggest gift of this professional self-doubt is the curiosity and the openness to be able to see when that's happening and to try something alternative. We also said to you that we are going to also be able to talk about understanding our skill set. And this is where the counselling self-estimate inventory comes in. This is also available on NovoPsych, and it's a way to, I guess, measure and self-reflect on your areas of perceived competence or areas to grow. So it's cut up into different domains of performance micro skills, so the actual techniques and the things that we do, developing an awareness of the process in therapy with our clients, working with challenging clients, developing cultural competence and awareness of self-values. And what you get from these results, and I really invite you to take the time to do this, perhaps after this training or during this week, is you start to see where you rate highly on these domains and where things are a little less. And this is not new territory. Other professions do this a lot. There's a story of Tiger Woods, who was fantastic at driving, and he wasn't yet the name that he is in the later years, but it was his putting that was letting him down. Rather than working on his driving, he spent many hours and years focusing on the putting. That was the area that he needed to grow in. So from an athletic pursuit, this is the type of thing that athletes do, that musicians do, to get their performance to the next level. But also, I think for us therapists, it's less about performance and it's more about just job satisfaction. You know, our job is really interesting. It's hard, but it is really, really interesting. And I know I've had the experience at times where I'm like, I don't know where to focus my efforts. I don't really know what to work on. When I think of models, there's 15 or 20 that I'd be interested in. This is a nice way to just hone that down. So in today's current pandemic age, being a therapist, we also have to be sustainable. We need to be able to continue to work, hopefully not with the caseloads that we currently have. I'm sure I'm in the same boat as everyone. But these are some tips to use to actually self-care based on what we've talked about today. Be proud of yourself that professional self-doubt gives you the gift of learning and curiosity. There's one thing that happened from today. I hope that for any of you feeling that this professional self-doubt was something bad or to be cured, that's flipped. And that you can see that this is really something positive in our profession. To consciously remind yourself of your strengths, what makes you a great therapist, and having that professional identity of who you are. I love this one. Write an I did list if feeling low or stressed. If you're thinking, I didn't get this done, I didn't get the GP letters off, I didn't close this case, I need to do this. Just write out in your balance of the things that you actually did. For me, the next one is the most potent and helpful one to continue a really high level of professional work satisfaction, and that is surround yourself with curious and forever learning colleagues. I've got a feeling that we've got 268 curious and forever learning people here today. And I really invite you to put yourself out there and find those people in your area or online. I mean, let's not get rid of that as an idea at the moment as well, because it does really help to have that tribe of people who do have that curiosity and that professional self-doubt, that are willing to think differently or outside of the box for clients, whilst also holding, I guess, the thing that gives us vitality as psychologists. This is really interesting work. I don't know about you, but I have many friends like, oh man, that must be so fascinating and interesting. And the day that we lose that, that's a real loss. So having people around us that have the same spirit and zest, I think is really vital. Importantly, question your approach, but never your value. This going back to that professional identity and the difference between that and professional self-doubt. And then where it's valuable for you, getting supportive supervision as well. And I would really invite people as part of that to, whether your supervisor has previously had experience with this or not, but invite discussions based on those clients that are deteriorating. I find it can really help to clarify what can be done and if it turns around. What I mean by that is bring in an oversight graph with 9 sessions of the DAS and this client getting worse perhaps, or staying the same despite best efforts, and then be able to talk to your supervisor. What could be done differently? What could I do here? And then bring the graph in again in a month. See if it turned it around, even by that 1%. So we have got feedback through our trainings that something that's very important for people is to be able to have things that are practical, to think about, to reflect on, and to do after training. I think this probably goes to that point that we were talking about training. Sometimes it can't directly impact clients because there's perhaps not enough of that practical. So if in doubt, this is the tip 1 and probably the most important tip here. Check in with your client. Ask your client, what's one thing from the session that could be done less or more to make next session a better session? Tip 2, be curious and question your approach, but never your value. So ensure that self-doubt is about your approach, as we've said, and not about your identity as a professional. And tip 3, if feeling burnt out, reach out. Colleagues, mentors, and supervisors are all helpful here. And 70% of professionals experience crippling professional self-doubt at some point in their career. And I would hazard a guess that given what we're in the environment now, this is the time where it's probably higher for people. Okay, Ben, before we go to feedback, I'm wondering, I can see over 99 comments in the chat and a few in the question and answer. Was there anything particular that you wanted to glean out?
So really, and someone anonymously posted, I think this is a really beautiful summary. They said, I've always felt sad over the belief that I will forever go through my career with self-doubt, always being aware of it, but never really being able to fix it. This training has been really important for me, so thank you. So that's some really lovely feedback. And I suppose that summarizes what I hope that people will get out of today, that, yeah, that professional self-doubt is not something to be fixed. It's something to use. As soon as you have zero professional self-doubt, you stop learning, you become cold, you become callous, you think you're an expert, you become uncaring. Clients don't want that. They want someone who's constantly learning and growing, and taking responsibility for the therapeutic relationship and the therapy. In some ways, professional self-doubt, that measure, is a proxy for how much responsibility the therapist is taking for the therapy. And I think we've said two things. We've said, on the one hand, don't take 100% of the responsibility for your client outcomes, because, you know, there's so many extra therapeutic factors that make a difference. And then simultaneously, we've said, but take responsibility and use your professional self-doubt as a prompt to lean into taking responsibility and do what you can.
I don't think we got the name of the person who gave that feedback before, but that was real goosebumps. That's lovely to hear, because I think, yeah, when professional self-doubt just goes and niggles away at us and we don't think it's normal, that we can't use it, shame can get attached and all those really challenging emotions. So it was really lovely to hear that.
Hey Nathan, with all this positive feedback, do you think your professional self-doubt will evaporate and go away and then you'll become arrogant?
Well, let's see. Come to another one of the trainings, and if I sit here with a top hat and a monocle, look down at you even from the webcam point of view, and speak in some kind of overly confident language, then we'll know that's the case. But my fingers crossed that doesn't happen.
Someone said, I was expecting this lecture to be on improving self-confidence. Refreshing to see a different stance on this. Hey, that's interesting. Thank you for that feedback. I suppose it could have been that. We could have taken that stance, couldn't we? It's like, you guys are all amazing. You're fantastic. You're contributing to, you know, you're practically superheroes.
I still think that.
Well, I think having self-doubt. Someone said, the irony is that so many of our clients experience self-doubt in some form or another, which is often why they are coming to see us. Self-doubt is part of being human. So it's important to realize that we are not immune to that just because we are psychologists or mental health professionals. Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Yeah.
Isn't it interesting in that few sentences, what I hear is a real sense of like commonality and empathy, in fact.
Yeah.
Which is, you know, also, you know, part of that alliance as well. Yeah. So just very interesting. I really love this. Love this feedback.
Someone's written, thank you for the self-disclosure, Nathan. That was very normalizing.
I wonder if there's an association about people with professional self-doubt and humor, because I have found that the chats, people got some good humor in there.
The chat's going off, by the way.
I know. If we could have 200 people odd on the screen, we would do it. But it would be a pretty crazy looking Brady Bunch situation. Absolutely. I'm not sure we'd be able to know who's who.
Heather said, this reminds me of the ignorance curriculum, being more aware of what you don't know. And yeah, I've heard of this. It's like where you write a CV for all the things that you don't know. I've also heard of failure resume, writing a resume of all the things that you've stuffed up or failed at. And I really like that idea. You know, just writing it and putting it out there, and these are all my failed things, and owning that and being okay with it. Because you know, we're so used to in CVs or resumes saying, I succeeded at this, I succeeded at this, I executed this. And you know, we're puffing out our chest, and having a failure CV or failure resume to list all of the failures that we've had can be humbling, you know? Yeah. Anyway, I think we're going to wrap it up there, guys. I mean, there's 20 comments I haven't even read. thank you to everyone for attending this webinar. It's been really fun. I hope that you know, some of the things that you've got out of this is knowing that professional self-doubt is really normal. It's associated with positive outcomes. If you've got professional self-doubt and self-compassion, that's a really good mix. You know, the other thing I suppose is there are some people whose professional self-doubt is probably too high, might be associated with anxiety, poor self-esteem, or poor self-compassion. If that's the case, you know, working on that separately from your working on that, I think, is a really helpful thing. But normal and uncomfortable feelings of professional self-doubt are very common, and it can be a tool that can be harnessed and used for the benefit of our clients. So thank you, everyone. And we will hopefully see you perhaps in the next webinar. Take care, everyone. Bye.
See you later.